crap. I opened up my beer by accident, but I'm going to do 12 punk albums of the beer. I had a really cool bottle opener, just going to showcase it. Buffalo Trace Distillery. I'm going to turn on my computer and I'm going to deliver punk albums. So 12 punk albums in this video. I am going to deliver 12 punk rock albums. So first off is Cheap Sex, Launch Off to War. That's a classic. Next to Cheap Sex, Headed for a Breakdown. Another Cheap Sex album, I cannot think of it. I'm about to look it up. But I think it was Written in Blood or something like that. Cheap Sex, Written in Blood. Then The Virus. System Failure, 2017 album, one of the best 2017 albums of punk rock. One of the greatest ones of all, paired with The Virus, Nowhere to Hide. Just a classic punk rock album. Just a classic. Classic paired with I'm gonna look up that Cheap Sex album, but Cheap Sex, Headed for a Breakdown, Cheap Sex, Launch Off to War. I'm gonna take a swig here. Look up the discography. Written in Blood, that's what it is. So Cheap Sex, Launch Off to War, Cheap Sex, Headed for a Breakdown, Cheap Sex, Written in Blood. Then The Virus, System Failure, The Virus, Nowhere to Hide. And I'm also going to mention the Global Threat album. Global Threat, What Will Change. A Global Threat, What Will Change. So I'm gonna mention two Global Threat albums. A Global Threat, What Will Change. You probably remember the album What Will Change, but I'm not gonna say it. But What Will Change, 2000s Until We Die. That's another classic A Global Threat. But anyway, Cheap Sex, Launch Off to War. Cheap Sex, Headed for a Breakdown. Cheap Sex, Written in Blood. The Virus, Nowhere to Hide. The Virus, System Failure, A Global Threat, What Will Change, A Global Threat, Until We Die. There's also one other A Global Threat album, and it had the Here We Are. That's the one I was thinking of. But Cheap Sex, Launch Off to War, Cheap Sex, Headed for a Breakdown, Cheap Sex, Written in Blood, The Virus, Nowhere to Hide, Virus, System Failure, A Global Threat, Here We Are, A Global Threat, Until We Die, A Global Threat, What Will Change, What will change? Age. Age. What will change paired with the Virus, Still Fighting for a Future 2000 album. The Virus, American Dream. American Dream is a classic. It's one album that doesn't get credit. Trying to think of another good one. I know The Exploited, Let's Start a War is a classic. I even got them on my shirt. And I'm going to go ahead and mention that one, but as a recap, Cheap Sex, Launch Off to War, Cheap Sex, Headed for a Breakdown, Cheap Sex, Written in Blood, The Virus, Still Fighting for a Future, Virus, Nowhere to Hide, The Virus, System Failure, A Global Threat, What Will Change, A Global Threat, Here We Are, A Global Threat, Until We Die, Until We Die is a classic. Trying to think of them all, but so I'm trying to think about 9 albums, I believe. But Cheap Sex, Launch Off the War, Cheap Sex, Headed for a Breakdown, Cheap Sex, Written in Blood, The Virus, American Dream, The Virus, Still Fighting for a Future, The Virus, Nowhere to Hide, The Virus, System Failure, A Global Threat, Until We Die, A Global Threat, Here We Are, A Global Threat, What Will Change, and then finally The Exploited, Let's Start a War, and The Exploited, he did another The Exploited album, The System. I would say it's their latest and most recent album. They haven't released an album since then, but The System, I know the actual title, but I'm not going to say it, but The System, those are the 12 albums, and that was 12 albums of the beer. Stella Artois beer. And at another point, I've thought about doing another top 5 The Exploited songs because I love The Exploited. But anyway, hope you all enjoyed. Same Wolf Man, same Wolf name, same Wolf channel, Wolfman Grim Reaper out.